welcome everybody to another episode of Detective Ridiculous, where we talk about the one thing more frightening than Warhammer real life. Before we get started, if you enjoy the podcast and the things that we do here on this channel, and you'd like to support us, go ahead and go to patreon.com/Adeptus Ridiculous, where you can get access to the Discord, bloopers if they happen, HD posters across the board, including the brand new one just released. And if you'd like to get any of those in a physical version or other kinds of merchandise from Detective Ridiculous, go ahead and check out orchidate.com. Link in the description.
You're getting good at that.
Rattle that shit off.
Yeah.
Like that.
It's becoming second nature for you. Nicely done.
You act like I haven't done this on my own channel for twice as long as you have.
Well, true, but when for these ones on Detective Ridiculous, there were a couple times where the Patreon thing didn't, you were kind of like, whoa, But
that's true. That's true.
You're smooth. You're smooth.
That's
smooth
true.
like butter.
Smooth like brain.
Like a criminal undercover.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Am I a good criminal?
I don't know.
Is that related to the episode, perchance?
No, I think those are Bruno Mars lyrics.
Oh, I mean,
smooth
okay.
like butter.
I mean,
Right?
I feel like our chat would be interested in hearing the fact that you made a Panic at the Disco reference and I did not get it.
Oh my god! I didn't realize we were gonna bring this up, but let's do it. Bricky had to get up and close his door. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna close the door," and I was like, "Oh." Well, I chimed in. Haven't you people ever heard of closing the goddamn door? And he was like, "What's that? What do you mean?" And I was like, "Oh."
Does that make me too boomer or too zoomer?
I believe that makes you too zoomer, because Panic at the Disco, I feel like, is not that old. So
I mean, I would agree, but yeah, whatever.
I don't want to waste too much of your time. We have a little chunky episode.
Yes. So a reminder, I believe, to all of our patrons and viewers, due to long story short, DK is going to be starting up that lovely Warhammer Fantasy conversation heading up. So for Detective Ridiculous, we really, really appreciate the support you've given us over the years. It's been a ton of fun, but we are ending it off with 2 final episodes, which is a perfect ending because we had one April Fool's, and then this will be our 25th total episode. So it will be exactly 2 full years of Detective Ridiculous.
I still have a hard time wrapping my brain around the fact that an April Fool's Day joke to gag on you was turned into a 2-year-long stint of episodes.
Honestly, it feels like it's been less than 2 years.
It does.
Way less than 2 years, but I think that's just because of episode cadence.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
On today's second to last episode of Detective Ridiculous, at least for a while anyway, we are jumping into a very, very highly requested topic. It is a disappearance that probably a lot of people have heard about, speculated about, and this is specifically a plane disappearance where the official investigation report basically says we have no fucking idea what happened.
Oh,
today.
Is this Malaysia flight?
Yes, it is! This is MH370. This is Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. You knew! You've heard of it.
Disappearing planes is a very rare occurrence. It is the safest form of travel in the world.
Yeah. Well, nowadays it is anyway.
Well, I mean, I think even back then, comparatively, compared to all kinds of other car accidents, etc.
I think when you look back at it with the lens of 2024, it's like, whoa, you didn't even really need to do security checks back then. It's like, well, because it was so relatively safe that, yeah.
Well, yeah, true. And I mean, even nowadays, the TSA pre-check crap is a very American thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But yes, okay. I have not done much looking into it. I've seen a little bit of it, but not a ton. So
okay.
you got me mostly. You've caught me mostly off guard, unguarded, unarmed, one might say.
Okay, hey, at least you've heard of it, right? That's better than most episodes. You've heard of this topic before.
That's hard to miss.
Yeah, fair enough. But let's not sugarcoat this one too much. We'll just jump right into it. So, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 was supposed to be a fairly routine flight on March 8th, 2014, and it would go from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Flight would take off right around midnight and would fly through the early morning hours to arrive in Beijing at right around 6 a.m., the break of dawn.
Kuala Lumpur's Malaysia?
Kuala Lumpur is Malaysia, yes.
Hence the name of the flight?
Yes. Well, technically speaking, I suppose Malaysia Airlines could fly out of somewhere other than Malaysia. Like they could fly out of Beijing, for example.
Sure.
But yeah, it is in Malaysia. But the flight was planned to last 5.5 hours. The plane is specifically a Boeing 777. And it carried enough fuel to fly for about 7.5 hours, give or take, just to account for any delays or if they had to divert or anything like that. There were 239 souls on board MH370, 12 crew members, and 227 passengers. The majority of passengers, some 153 people, were from China. The rest were just kind of from scattered countries. I think the next one was there were 50 Malaysian citizens, and then there's just a spattering, and then 2 Americans, I think. Now, the crew were all from Malaysia, and it's a pretty experienced crew aside from the first officer. The pilot is a man named Captain Zahri Ahmed Shah. He was 53 years old, and he had almost 20,000 hours of flying experience.
That's wild. Well, is that wild? That sounds like a lot.
I mean, I don't know what the standard flight hours for a pilot are, but isn't it if you spend 10,000 hours doing literally anything, you are considered a master of that thing?
Tell that to League of Legends players.
Oh, let's not talk to League of Legends players, period.
10,000 hours. You still in silver, son? Nice.
Oh, I hate that. But he also had almost 10,000 hours flying this specific type of Boeing plane, the 777. His first officer is a 27-year-old named Farik Abdul Hamid. However, he was still basically a greenhorn by comparison. He only had about 3,000 hours total flying experience and maybe around 40 hours on this specific Boeing type of plane, the 777. And this was his last sort of training flight for the 777 before he got his full pilot status or his full go-ahead to be able to fly in a 777. I think this was his first flight where he didn't have a training instructor. He was doing well enough. They're oh yeah, you're going to go with just Captain Shaw? Nobody else? That's fine. You're good. As for the rest of the crew, saw a documentary kind of outlining how experienced they were in the sense that the most senior member of this flight crew had 35 years experience, and the most junior person of the crew had 13 years of experience. So, not a flight crew that is prone to mistakes or casual accidents or anything like that.
Minus the greenhorn guy, right?
Yeah, minus the first officer. But he still has 3,000 hours of flying experience. He's just not super experienced on a Boeing 777.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, so very experienced crew. So everything about Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 is pretty standard. It's completely fueled up. The oxygen tanks have been filled up, which is an important detail for later, and they're pretty much ready for takeoff. Granted, they're oh my god, they're 7 minutes late for takeoff, but that's every flight ever, so that's
I was about to say, what do you even mean?
Yeah,
you mean that's flying in general?
Yeah, 7 minutes late is it's on time. Anyway, so Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 takes off without a hitch. And like I said before, everything is going perfectly normal. Clear skies and smooth sailing. And, all the check-ins are being made with air traffic control. They're being tracked by all the radars, satellites, stuff like that. And they're, proceeding normally towards Beijing. And up until this point, there's only one sort of hiccup. At one point, the captain calls in to let Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control know that they're like, oh yeah, hey, we're leveled out, everything is fine at blah blah blah, and that's pretty normal. Only weird part that people have is like 7 minutes later, he calls in with literally the exact same message, letting them know again that it's like, oh yeah, we're at this level, everything is standard. And there was this really good documentary video going around. There are so many documentaries on this thing, going over like all these facts and going over the actual call, and hints at the idea that you could tell that like there was a slight difference in Captain Shaw's voice in the second call. Like, he sounds maybe a little more rushed. Maybe he's like trying to do something. Maybe he's a little not focused. But something sounds different. But that is purely speculative, because as a lot of pilots will say, sometimes you just get busy. You're just away from the radio, or maybe you just have a brain fart and forget, oh, right, I already made the call, but you know what? Let's just call in to make sure. Let's call in, make sure we're still good with air traffic control. Let's make sure I didn't miss a message for them. So that could be just a big nothing burger that he called in twice in 7 minutes. So, at around 1:20 in the morning, MH370 is about to cross into Vietnam airspace and is told by the Kuala Lumpur air traffic controller, hey, why don't you go ahead, contact Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control, and we'll leave you in their hands. They're going to be the ones that are guiding you. Because obviously, when you cross out of Malaysian airspace and into Vietnam, new flight controller. And
how long was this flight? How long was the flight?
I believe this flight should have gone for about 5 to 5.5 hours.
Okay, so it's not that long.
Not that long, no. It'd be like if I was going from my spot in California to Hawaii, more or less.
I always forget how far Hawaii is from
Yeah, it seems like it's so much closer, and it's like, it's really not, actually.
No, it's really not. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So, MH370 would respond simply by saying, I believe their only response was, good night, Malaysian 370. Just to sort of like, oh yeah, confirm, we'll blah, blah, blah. But, good night, we're off. See you next time. But that's also kind of weird that the message was specifically good night, Malaysian 370. And the reason that's kind of weird is because apparently you are supposed to always finish your messages with the frequency you're on. That way, you and air traffic control can make sure that you're on the same page, you're on the right frequency, nobody's getting the wrong information, everybody's just kind of like, we're all good. So it's really weird that such an experienced captain didn't do that. Although I have seen in more documentaries and more stuff that I looked up that sometimes captains that are really experienced just don't do that. They're just like, yeah, look, I'm good. I know I'm on the right frequency. You know I'm on the right frequency. I'm a busy guy. Let's just cut the fandango and let's just go. So again, could be just another big nothing burger.
That is a thing that I always assume. Like, the more experienced you become, the more like smaller bits of protocol become just like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. We know what we're doing. But that goodnight Malaysian 370 would be the last message that was ever received from MH370. And at this point, obviously, a lot of weird stuff starts happening because MH370 turns its transponder off. Like, just as it crosses into Vietnam airspace, they turn their transponder off, which is actually like this very hard thing to do because there are so many redundant power systems that will like fire on the transponder or fire on a radar tracking thing that it is a very specific way you have to like power down the plane in order to like make those transponders turn off. So when those transponders and like the ACARs and everything get cut, it causes this like disappearing effect where Malaysian air traffic control has probably stopped monitoring them because they've like handed them over to like Ho Chi Minh. But then also the flight basically disappears off the radar. And so Ho Chi Minh is like, well, they haven't reported in yet, and we don't see them on there. So, like, they kind of just vanish a little bit. They just vanish off radars.
Can you, if the plane, I mean, not to jump ahead in a sense, but if the plane crashes and stuff, I'm assuming the transponder stops working as well.
Sure, because it's broken.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Don't worry, that's not really a jumping ahead thing. But it takes Ho Chi Minh air traffic control somewhere in the ballpark of like 18 minutes before they call Malaysian air traffic control to be like, hey guys, where is MH370? And Malaysia air traffic control is like, what the are you talking about? Where are they? It's been 20 minutes. You don't have them? And so Ho Chi Minh is just like, no, but like, do you guys see them on your radar? Because they haven't checked in with us, and we don't really know what's going on. And so Malaysia starts looking at their radar, and they're like, oh, there they are. They're headed north into Cambodia. Oh, man, but we can't get in contact with them. Nobody in Cambodia air traffic control sees them. No other planes in the area know where they are. So it's a little alarming. They're all a little like, what are they doing in Cambodia? Because their flight plan has them going over Vietnam. They weren't actually seeing real-time footage of MH370. What their little tracking radar was throwing up on the screen was the projected flight path of where MH370 was going. For some reason, that's what the Malaysian radar was doing. It was throwing up images of where they thought MH370 should be. The radar wasn't actually tracking them at all. It was giving them here's probably where they should be given what all the headings are.
Wait,
which is wild to me. Why
would the radar tell them that they should be in an area they were never supposed to be in and guess?
It is the craziest thing to me that's how this Malaysian Airlines like radar system worked. That it was just like, here's where they are in the future, and it's like not even close to like what the flight plan even was.
That's weird.
It's very strange. But there actually was a radar system at this time that was tracking MH370. It was the Thailand military's primary radars. Like I said, right now, the only radar system that's tracking them is the Thailand military's primary radars, which is kind of like your normal radar that just picks up pings and stuff. And if you're looking at a map, or maybe you just know geography, you'll know that is entirely in the opposite direction that everyone thinks MH370 should be in. Shai, I don't know if you can toss up a map, but yeah, see where Thailand is and see where Vietnam is on that map Shai just put up.
Not quite the spot.
Yeah, not quite the spot. And because, of course, the military are going to be monitoring anything moving in their airspace, they see this little blip and all that. But, like, they don't really do anything because they're kind of just like, well, they're not invading our airspace, and they're probably just turning around for some, like, malfunction, or maybe they're diverting for some reason. So, like, what are we supposed to do?
Well, yeah, we're not going to shoot them down.
Yeah. Okay, let's not sugarcoat it. Well, look, I'm being nice. It is maybe a little bit of incompetence as well.
Oh,
sure. It might just be a little incompetence of them not paying attention, not doing their job, just kind of being asleep at the wheel. Because as Shai says, if this was like. Because this is a post 9/11 world. If this was the United States, they would have scrambled jets like that. And they probably would have done something maybe a little drastic because we can't have another 9/11. We simply cannot. This plane is not responding. We don't know where it's going. We don't know why it's here. They would, America would scramble jets like that.
I mean, that is true. But this isn't America.
It's true. But what we also know from those radar images is that as soon as like they crossed into Vietnam airspace, MH370 did this really crazy turn. They basically did this crazy 180 out of Vietnam airspace and just kind of heads over towards Thailand. And it should be noted that this crazy turn is basically, it's impossible for the autopilot system to achieve it. I am pretty sure Boeing actually tried to recreate it, and they were like, yeah, no, the autopilot system, it literally is not capable of turning that sharply, that quickly. The autopilot system had to be turned off. Someone had to have taken control for the thing to do a turn this hard. And if you're thinking, oh, okay, hijacking, gotcha. So obviously someone else took control, hard steer, whatever. Problem with that is there just wasn't enough time. By the time they signed off and by the time they made this turn, I think maybe 1 minute has passed. So there's just not enough time to like storm the cockpit, get the pilots out of their seats, take control, and then deja vu this thing. There's just not enough time. And there are so many safety precautions in place in planes now that the pilot could have very easily just shut the goddamn door, locked him out, and it would have been fine. But we'll talk about speculations a little later. There are speculations.
I mean, anytime any pilot is in the bathroom, you literally see the like the flight attendants stand guard in the hallways. So
it should also be noted that at no point was a distress call, an indication of bad weather, a call about technical problems, a call about anything at all being wrong was never made. There was never any indication that anything was wrong. And like Shai says, this plane, almost everything gets turned off except for the most necessary systems. The transponder is off, ACARS is off, all the satellite tracking is off, and then suddenly, boom, it deja vu's like this. Anyway, we'll talk about it.
Oh wait, what is ACARS again?
So ACARS is essentially the satellite system that lets air traffic control talk to the plane.
All right, let's see how smart you are, DK. What's it stand for, huh?
I actually have it written down here in one of the... It's a little further on. Oh, wait, no, I got it. It stands for Air Communication Addressing and Reporting System.
Damn, he's good.
What can I say?
All right, continue.
Oh, get absolutely... kid. Anyway, so MH370 is kind of heading southwesterly at this point towards a Malaysian island called Penang. Shai wants to note, unlike with 9/11, there was also no phone calls from aboard the plane from passengers. That is very true.
Good point.
There is a way to account for that one too, unfortunately. Well, not really, but we'll talk about it. Anyway, so it is kind of heading southwesterly at this point towards this Malaysian island called Penang. And it kind of swings around the southern part of this island called Penang and starts heading for the Indian Ocean through this strait called the Malacca Strait. Now, one of the more terrifying ideas here, and one that is presented in almost every documentary, every source you look up, whatever, is that during the time when MH370 dropped off conventional radars, like we said, the plane is probably mostly powered down to its just bare essential functions for flying, to remain as hidden as possible from radar, satellites, so nobody can get in touch with them. And the reason that's so terrifying is because that means that when this plane is flying up at around, 35,000 plus feet, the cabin is now depressurized. And
okay, so something is open or broken.
Yes. During all of the power downs and everything, there is a vent that gets opened up, and the cabin just kind of...
Wait, how do we know it's a vent?
I believe that's one of the little control panel-y thingamly doodah days. Yeah, it's a function on the plane. So when you turn everything off, it kind of, I don't want to say automatically does that, but it's just one of those things that I think happens when you turn everything off. You also
because it's assumed that you're grounded.
And so when you're at like 35,000 feet in the air, you in a depressurized cabin are going to need oxygen. Badly.
Remember that crazy person who like opened the emergency air thing in that one plane?
Oh yeah. Actually, I remember that one like attempted terrorist that was like, "Oh, I'm gonna blow up the plane," and it was like in his laptop or something, and the laptop blew up, and he got sucked out of the plane, and he was the only fatality.
That's so funny. And like a fucked up like if I was on that plane, I would have like never flown again. But that's so funny.
Oh yeah. But so, and the only source of oxygen you as a passenger have are obviously those oxygen masks that drop down in case of emergency.
I wouldn't know. I sleep through all of the demonstrations.
Well, don't worry. The adult next to you would have helped the child, put your mask on and would have guided you through it. Don't worry.
You know, that was actually could have been funny, but you had to specify the me child, and it's like you explained the joke. You lost it a little bit. Have more faith in your audience, DK.
I just didn't have faith that you'd get it, actually.
All right, better.
So I felt like I needed to explain it to you specifically. What child? What? DK, what child you talking about?
A side note. Shai posted that picture of all the people with the oxygen masks. You know the usual. Have you ever, this is so off topic, have you ever seen those like duck boat tours that people do with like the amphibious like bus thing, and they go in the water and they give you like the duck bill, and if you blow into it, it goes like wah 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 wah.
I know of the duck bill wah, wah, wah calls, but I've never heard of anything before that. I've never seen those duck tours.
All right, well that's fine. It's like the most Caucasian thing I've ever done in my life, but I remember really enjoying it because it was like a Boy Scout event.
Okay, well, hey, you were a Boy Scout. You're probably a little kid. That probably would be super fun as a kid. To be fair,
it's just the first thing I thought of. It's fine. We can continue.
Okay. So, bigger problem about those drop-down masks. From all the sources I looked up, the oxygen in those masks is only going to give you 10, maybe 20 minutes before they are out.
I thought you were going to do something like the oxygen in those masks are not real. It's
they're
fake
not
oxygen.
It's totally fake.
You start you open the mask and it like shoots out a bunch of like clown silly string at you instead. Like, oh no, we're on a prankster's clown.
Oh geez, the pilot's just a big prankster.
The pilot walks out with like a clown hair and a nose on. And then the plane starts falling to the ground.
Oh man, what a terrible way to go that would be.
It's okay.
That'd be awful.
It was all a prank.
But yeah, so. And also, if anybody's wondering why isn't there more oxygen in these masks, apparently it's because when those things drop, it assumes that the cabin has been compromised, depressurized, everybody needs the oxygen, and it should only take about 10 minutes for the pilot to be like, whoa, we need to descend to a lower altitude where everybody can breathe. And so that shouldn't take more than like 10 to 20 minutes. You should be able, pilots should do that relatively quickly. You shouldn't need more air than that. But once that oxygen starts to run out, you kind of start to go dark. Hypoxia starts to set in. Irreversible brain damage happens. Then you pass out, and then, well, that's kind of all she wrote for you. But the oxygen tank that provides oxygen to the cockpit through like this emergency full mask, that can last you up to 20 to 25 hours. So the pilot during all this is fine, but the passengers, they are in a little bit of trouble.
Well, I mean, if I'm going to save anyone on the flight, it should be the pilot because I need him to land the plane.
Yeah, that he's kind of the most important person to have like as much oxygen as possible because he's going to be the only one that can really save the plane. Also, the oxygen tank had been like topped up before this flight started, which gets people to be like, because I think the captain specifically was like, hey guys, can you top up the oxygen tanks for me? And a lot of people like, wow, I guess in hindsight, that's a little suspicious.
I guess, but like, isn't it like, aren't you supposed to have your oxygen topped?
Yeah, but I think I remember seeing on one of the sources I looked up that the thing only gets topped up like once every, like maybe a couple times a year, because you so rarely use it.
Well, I guess on one hand, I was going to say, like, well, this is a really experienced pilot and all that kind of stuff. So it would make more sense if they were, cool with that whole thing. But like, they're like, hey, just like, I'm a good pilot. I want to be careful and safe and top that stuff up for me.
Yeah.
But
when he asked for it, it was probably like, oh, yeah, sure, dude, no problem. Yeah, we got you. But in hindsight, everybody's like, oh, I guess that kind of was a little weird.
Well, it creates a contradiction in my head because on one hand, I was like, he didn't really talk about like good night Malaysia or whatever is just like, simple, whatever like informalities, who cares? I would assume that he would take a similar stance to like the oxygen in a way because he's like, this thing is barely topped off. I'm sure we're fine.
Yeah, true. Also, another reason that we know that MH370 was sort of circling around Penang is because there was just the briefest ping from a cell phone tower on Penang from the first officer's phone. It was brief enough that, like, you could register the phone number and that there was a phone that was being turned on, but there wasn't enough time or there wasn't a strong enough signal for the first officer to, like, make a call, contact someone, be like, hey, something's wrong up here, there's a hijacking, etc., etc. It was just long enough to register that, hey, the first officer's phone is on and it's his number.
Okay, so it's a ping as in active, not a ping as in anything was sent.
Yeah, exactly. The cell tower just caught it, like, oh, hey, you've got 1 bar, and that's it.
Okay. Does that go into the whole idea of no one made any calls because no one had service?
Probably, because as they were turning, I think they were pretty close to a cell phone tower, but I don't think so. I think everybody
when
just
they were
kind
turning.
Yeah, well, at least that's what I heard on one of them. Is like they were turning and they were close enough to like the ground that it was like, phone, turn on, phone on. So again, the plane more than likely powered down at this point to pretty much stay completely undetected. And at this point, I think we're rolling it somewhere around an hour or so since the flight made that big turn. And the reason nobody else tried to make a phone call at this point is because, as grim as this sounds, at this point, flight MH370 is a flying graveyard. Anyone outside the cockpit at this point is dead. They wouldn't have had anywhere near enough oxygen in their mask to last this long.
Because it was depressurized.
Yeah.
No one... Well, you got 10 minutes, though.
Yeah, you
no one made a single call in 10 minutes?
Probably not, because they probably didn't realize what was going on. It still seemed pretty standard at that point, because they were just like making a turn.
There's nothing standard about having your oxygen mask drop.
True, but like at that point, everybody's like, oh, just take your seats and, everything will be fine. And, they probably just thought they were diverting and they needed to make an emergency landing. They didn't realize anything was wrong until it was probably like way too late.
But like no text messages?
No.
Well, it's just, okay, so like
it is also very hard to talk with a mask on, but I would assume if you really thought you were in a dire situation, you could probably pull the mask up for a little bit to like make a phone call.
So
right?
But what I'm mainly getting at is that like, I fly a lot. There are like the tiniest amount of turbulence will have someone freak the fuck out and start like saying prayers. Like it's just flight anxiety. It's very common.
True.
The idea that they had dropped oxygen masks and no one even sent like a text message to a loved one just seems off.
I mean, Honestly, like I feel like there are tons of times where something will happen, like nowadays, right? Where oxygen masks will drop and there needs to be an emergency landing, and you don't really hear a ton about people being like, "Oh yeah, my first thought was to pick up the phone and call someone," right?
I didn't say call. I said text.
Oh, text. Oh, fair enough.
I was just specifically like people like. I mean, did they not?
And they might have been in a spot where like there just wasn't any service too.
That's
like
what
they
trying
had
to figure out, because
they
like,
had
people...
to be near. From what I understand, they needed to be near Penang and flying around the corner of it for there to even be that little moment of having a blip where the thing could even register it. So they might not have even had service to call someone if they wanted.
Plane was at max height with disabled Wi-Fi and all connection systems. Okay, because that was the question.
That's true, right? It's everything is all turned off. Yeah.
Because most planes have Wi-Fi, and therefore you're able to send messages and do all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that's why I'm trying to figure that out.
I don't know why that didn't immediately register with me that like everything was turned off. So of course you can't get a signal. But yeah, so yeah, at this point, it's a flying graveyard. But
anyway, it's just like I assume sometimes that on a plane they would have like, here were the text messages sent during Malaysia flight, and you can like garner something from it.
Yeah. But as MH370 flew along the Malacca Straits, it started to turn towards the Indian Ocean. There would also be these sort of sign-in requests from satellites from a company called Inmarsat, which, to make a long story short about Inmarsat, they're basically the ones that like provide the communication between like the plane, air traffic control, and they're the ones that sort of like make the ACARS reporting system work. And suddenly their satellites are kind of getting these like, they're getting these login pins. They're getting like these login pings, sort of like requesting like, oh, are you logging in? Do you need to log in? And the reason they are getting these pings is because the plane has powered up again. And the plane is now flying under full electrical power because someone has powered up that big old Boeing 777 again.
How long after this was it?
Oh, this must have been hour, 2 hours, probably like 2-ish hours afterwards, I want to say. So yeah, like these handshakes are being requested, like they're trying to log in. Nothing's going through, no messages are being sent, but because the plane is on, its system is still trying to like connect. And the main reason I've seen for, well, why is the plane powering up again? There's still plenty of oxygen in the thing, is because if whoever was piloting this plane, they realized that there were a bunch of computers and equipment that they needed cooling fans. They needed to be cooled down or they would short circuit and they would lose all manner of navigation on their console. All the screens would turn off, all the stuff would be lost, and it was just like one of those things where it's like, well, I have to turn the damn plane back on now, or it is just going to be impossible to do what I need to do. Also, they thought, they were like, oh, well, it's also safe to turn everything back on because I am now out of range of most of the military and civilian radars. You know, I don't have to be worrying about powering up. And like Shai said, also, everyone is dead, so I don't really have to worry about someone storming the cockpit.
Side question. You probably already answered this, but to double check and to remind myself, why did they not reach a lower altitude when everyone was out of oxygen? Are we assuming foul play?
Yes, we are assuming foul play. We are assuming that the reason that they did not go to a lower altitude is because the whole point was to incapacitate and kill everyone on board.
That's a pretty dastardly plan. Even the dude stealing the mail, the mail plane, whatever that guy's name, with the badass ex fighter jet dudes. Even he was at least only going to kill himself and the other two of them.
Yeah, it is. It's a little grimdark. It's a little grimdark.
Well, we're used to that around here.
A little bit. So, even though the plane isn't sending messages or receiving them, these login requests are still just pinging off the satellite. And so, Inmarsat was actually able to use these login attempts, which we're calling handshakes, to sort of get a general idea of where MH370 was. Because basically, they could use these pings to be like, okay, so the satellite is kind of like based in maybe like the middle of the Indian Ocean, right? It's kind of hovering over the Indian Ocean. And so
satellites are based all right. Yuck, 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 yuck.
But like, we know the satellite has like an effective range. And so that effective range makes like this arc. It makes this big circle of like, okay, the MH370 has to be somewhere on this circle because that's the range of the damn satellite. So they're like, okay, we can kind of figure out where they are not. Obviously, they can't be in frickin' Africa because they don't have enough fuel to be in Africa. So they've got to be somewhere on this little arc. Like, Shai just put up a sort of flight plan thing of like all of the little arcs that this thing could be on. So as time keeps going on and as more login handshakes are being made, the arc keeps getting updated because as it moves further and further, the arc changes, right? So throughout the morning, more of these handshakes are being made, and early morning hours, we're basically in Nowheresville. Like, MH370, regardless of like what arc it's actually on, it is basically alone in the middle of nowhere in the Indian Ocean, or over the Indian Ocean, and essentially it is a flying ghost ship, except for the captain. And as you can see on the map Shai put up, the Indian Ocean is vast, and they are just somewhere in like the middle of it, sort of.
Pacific is better. Sorry.
You're so California coded. Oh my God.
Pacific Ocean's kind of cooler. Mm-hmm.
Indian Ocean nice, but you know, I like to think that the Pacific Ocean is a little cooler, bro.
Wait, so you said except for the captain, isn't there like a co-captain? Like the guy in the other pilot seat?
So there is. Yeah, allegedly, except for the captain. We'll
get there. Okay,
get there. Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts.
There are. This is oh boy, MH370 is kind of deep. I didn't mean to say it like that.
Possibly in more ways than one.
I meant. That's not. Jeez.
Skadoosh.
I'm. Good lord. So another handshake. Login would be attempted at around 8:11 in the morning, only about half an hour earlier after just countless fruitless attempts to contact MH370. Malaysia Airlines had been like, guys, we hate to tell you this, but like we don't know where the flight is. We are initiating search and rescue attempts, and we don't know where it is. And they are completely oblivious to the fact that MH370 was actually still in the air. And the final seventh handshake would be attempted at around 8:20 that morning, around the time the Boeing 777 ran out of fuel. One of the documentaries I watched noted that like there's this feature on the Boeing 777 that if both engines fail and somehow you are completely out of fuel, everything's powered down, there is reserve fuel kept in this thing known as the auxiliary power unit. And the whole point of this thing is if everything goes absolutely tits up, there is some emergency fuel back there, and it can power all of your really super essential stuff and give you just one more shot at somehow getting out of this absolute mess.
You're gonna hate me, but you're gonna hate me for saying one shot, one opportunity, because it's a song reference that, you know, is it roughly the similar time frame? But
you only get one shot. Do not miss your
don't miss your chance to sink.
Yep, unfortunate.
Wait, is it? Wait, hold up.
Okay.
Shai makes a statement. I want. It's not emergency fuel. It's an emergency electric battery.
Oh, I had literally heard that it was like there was like emergency fuel in there, but it's actually like a battery. Okay. So it's an emergency electric battery. Sorry.
Life support systems, that whole thing.
It's like an auxiliary sort of like safety net, pseudo safety net. But in this instance anyway, even though the plane is out of fuel and it's basically all powered down, in this instance, the APU, as people call it, essentially like powers up some essential systems, and it creates this last login attempt with the Inmarsat satellites. It should also be noted that at this point, the plane has ascended to somewhere around 40,000-ish feet in the air, which
APU, auxiliary power unit.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
But yeah, it's 40,000 feet in the air, which means this plane has, as it runs out of fuel that high, it is going to start a nosedive that basically puts the plane into a supersonic speed dive as it crashes into the Indian Ocean and basically just pulverizes MH370.
Right. Because these things, do planes break apart like cars do? Because cars break apart like intentionally.
Yeah, so I have to believe it is very similar as to how like the front is sort of has like that crumple zone.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Yeah, I would assume that planes are basically the same way. I was about to make a joke about a certain silver car, but I'm not going to do it.
A certain silver car?
Yeah, a certain silver truck.
Oh, the goddamn stupid fucking Cybertruck. Yeah. It's supposed to break, damn it.
Anyway, now you might be saying to yourself, okay, cool. So just go search where they got that last ping, recover what you can, and put this thing to bed. Problem is that during all of this, there was just a massive failing by both Malaysia Airlines and the Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control. Like, when it came to being transparent about what happened, they were not great. They were not great. Because you need to remember that for like the longest time, Malaysia and Ho Chi Minh, they thought that MH370 was flying over Cambodia, and they were assuming that it was just lost without comms. The Thailand and Malaysian military, like we said, they both saw MH370 on their primary radar, and they saw it making that turn, but they didn't actually tell anyone about that until like 2 or 3 days later, when MH370 was becoming headline news, and then they were like, oh, I guess we should probably check our radar logs, and and they didn't get all that satellite data with all the arcs and all the pings. They didn't get that immediately from Inmarsat either. Not because Inmarsat did anything wrong, but obviously it's going to take them a little while to do all the calculations and be like, hey, maybe we could use these handshakes. And I think I was reading that this was like one of the first times they had used satellite data in this manner to try to like track something down.
Now I don't want to be culturally insensitive in this situation.
Okay.
But the Malay, like Thailand, was Thailand military?
Yeah, Thailand and Malaysian military both saw them on their primary radars. I think it was both of them.
What is like their military capabilities? Like, because obviously we think about like the U.S. and we know like a half second when that bitch enters our airspace, we're just like kill it now, right?
Yeah, right.
But no, that's naturally an America reaction craziness type thing. But like you talk about satellite and stuff, like is it incompetence or is it like bad tech? Is kind of like partially the question.
I think it's probably a little of both. But yeah, that was another problem, is like for a while, and I'll probably repeat this later, for a while, Malaysia did not want to actually release the radar data because they were afraid that if they released it, any country that didn't like them or wanted to do something against them, they'd be like, oh, this is their radar capability. This is how far their radar reaches. This is how we get them. Right?
That's true. That's true. I guess we wouldn't really know because that's not knowledge that can be made public.
They wanted to keep that very hush hush. I think they eventually did, though. I think they eventually released it.
I'm not calling them like a third world country or something.
Oh,
I was just
right,
trying to figure out like, is it like, which is it? Is it incompetence or is it bad like material or maybe both?
Yeah. Maybe a little of both. Also, Shai said, presumably plane disintegrated even before it hit the water, though, because it's not built for supersonic speed. From what I garnered, the plane was absolutely breaking apart before it hit the water, but I don't think it had been completely, like, obliterated before hitting the water, but it was basically, like, flying apart, for sure.
I imagine it was coming apart as time went on.
Yeah. So when the initial search and rescue actually got underway, they were looking in the South China Sea, which is, again, completely the wrong area because, again, they simply didn't know better. I think it took them like a week to finally like compile and use the satellite data, before they were like, oh, shoot. We need to be looking not here. We need to be looking over in the Indian Ocean. Oh, yeah, we're in the wrong spot. And given how vast and deep the Indian Ocean is, they basically had no chance of finding MH370. Like if they had gotten there that morning, like as soon as they knew it went down, they might have had a chance to find something that they could have used, but like 3-4 a week later is like they had no chance.
I was about to say, like, people act like we've got just the ability to find anything because of satellite and radar and all these kinds of stuff, but the ocean is so fucking big.
And this is a big ocean. This isn't just like, if it crashed in, like, say, the Bay of Bengal, it's like, well, you could probably find it there. But in like the middle of the Indian Ocean, and you don't even know, even with all that satellite data, we still don't know exactly where it dropped. We have a general idea, but we still don't know where to look. And that's a big ocean.
I mean, it's no Pacific Ocean, but
yeah, that it's God damn it.
I'm sorry.
You're not gonna let that go, are you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, God no.
The Fesh Pins plane? Is that what you were going to say?
I'm so fucked up. You said the French plane, and I was like the Fesh pain.
The Fesh Pins?
I'm so doomed. I'm so cooked, man.
You are so cooked.
But no, like the French plane crash. They knew exactly where it crashed, and it took them 2 years to find the damn thing.
Yep.
It's an issue because it's like it's Occam's razor. In a way.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Where do you, like, why can't we find it? Because the ocean is really big.
And it's really deep, too. Like, I don't, like, getting to the sea floor of the Indian Ocean is just like, like, nope. And, like I said, the initial impact into the ocean at, like, supersonic speed probably ruined and destroyed a majority of the plane, but any parts that were remaining, like we said, they're probably sitting like at the bottom of the sea. We don't know the exact location, so trying to comb the Indian Ocean is like, yeah, it's not possible. Essentially, you just gotta wait until like stuff washes up on the shore. And not for lack of trying, there was a huge international search of the area. I think at one point, Australia was even like, look, we got you. And they funded a huge chunk of the search for MH370 out of their pockets. And they were in collaboration with Malaysia and China, trying to find any clues at all. But, like, they weren't really finding anything. Like, no matter how hard they tried, no matter how many countries got involved, it was just like they weren't finding anything. And it would just seem very hopeless. And, again, the only evidence you're probably going to find is something that hopefully washes up on the shores. And stuff does actually start washing up on the shores, but I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. Anyway, so Malaysia and Malaysia Air also naturally come under heavy scrutiny, especially from China, since a majority of the passengers on that flight were from China. And like I said, Malaysia was not being open and transparent about what information they had or even what happened. What made it worse was that I remember reading a source that said that nothing could really be done about settlements and payments to the families for the longest time because there was no plane. So there was no evidence that it was an accident. There was no evidence that it was foul play. So until you can have some sort of like concrete piece of evidence, a verdict can't really be filed. And so, like, they were offered, like, comfort money. According to Wikipedia, anyway, they were offered comfort money, but it was, like, $5,000 or something.
Oh, yikes.
And to me, that's, like, the most insulting thing ever. Like, obviously, you can't put a price on a relative or a friend's life, but, like, $5,000 is like, dude, what the... Like, really? But when Malaysia Airlines finally announced that MH370 was like, oh, it's lost, it was an accident, there are no survivors, I think that allowed these big payments to be made. I think there was like between like $50,000 and $175,000 were awarded to the families, which still isn't really a lot, but it put Malaysia Airlines in the hole for like, I don't know, $4.5 million, which doesn't really seem like...
Okay, so very random. Is Malaysian Airlines a government-funded airline, or is it a privately owned airline that's just called Malaysian Airlines? Because I don't know if Air Canada is a government like owned airline.
I believe it's a state-funded airline, isn't it, Shai?
Because I don't know, like, is this government money or is this like a company getting screwed up? Not screwed up, like, but you know, like who's paying?
Yeah, I think it's a state-run thing, but I don't know specifically. I just remember that Malaysia Airlines had a lot of financial troubles after this happened, so I'm assuming it is airline money.
Yeah, because the government, well, they can't just print more money, but they can also just print more money.
Yeah, they're not supposed to print more money, but they do it. Print more money, yeah. And like I was reading on the wiki that apparently Inmarsat had sent the data to Malaysia like 3 days after the disappearance, but Malaysia hadn't acknowledged it for like a week or something. And they claimed that like, oh, well, we needed to verify the data. We needed to make sure the data was right. Like we couldn't just go out there and just do it because they said so. We needed to, you know. And like we said before, they also claim they couldn't reveal the military radar images because that's sensitive data, because then everyone could see how sensitive their radars are, the effective range. The military, like we said, was also grilled on how could you let an unidentified plane flying through Malaysian airspace just slip under your noses without scrambling a jet to intercept it? Again, especially considering this is a post-9/11 world that should be raising every red flag in the book. And I think the military responded by saying, well, it was a passenger plane. It's not like we're just going to shoot it down. And if we're not going to shoot it down, why should we send up jets to intercept it?
You send up jets to look at it and be like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, what's going on?
You can at least communicate with it.
Exactly. Like you can try to radio it. You can see if there are passengers that are alive. You can see the status of the pilot. You know.
I mean, if anything, I would argue that good old that if you're the pilot, okay, you're hijacker man, right? Mm-hmm. Or you're bad person man. You see two like fighter jets fly up in front of your front view or whatever.
Yeah.
And like maybe you've turned off all communication because you're an asshole. But like, I think I would immediately think in my head, these guys are going to shoot me down and I'm going to die. I should probably like try to bargain for my life or like try to lie to them on the phone or something. But you know.
Yes, so we'll talk about that. Also, Shai said basically Malaysia Airlines went bankrupt because of this and another of their planes being shot down over Ukraine, so government bought it out and now it's a government-owned company. Okay, got you. And wasn't the
did one of their planes get shot down by the Russian army when it was flying over Ukraine or something?
I forget, because like wasn't that the only other time a Boeing 777 had gone down? Was because it got shot down in Ukraine's airspace?
Wait,
something like that?
Very important question here.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any Boeing employees of a particular knowledge center on this flight.
Not that I'm aware of.
Damn it.
Not that I'm aware of.
We could have cracked the case wide open.
We could have. So we're going to kind of speed this up a little bit. But it should come as no real surprise that the leading theory is that this plane, the Boeing 777 MH370, was specifically taken off course by the pilot and flown to its doom. Because at some point during the flight, the captain probably asked the first officer, who is a greenhorn, to like, hey, could you go check on something in the back? Something feels a little funky. I'm getting a light that's going off. Could you go check that thing? Or maybe it was like, hey, I'm getting a little hungry, getting a little thirsty. Hey, can you go get me a plate of food? Go get me a cup of coffee or something. Just, to get him out of the cockpit. And then once the first officer is out of the cockpit, because he's a greenhorn, he's like, oh, of course I want to impress the captain. Of course, I'll do whatever the captain tells me. The captain would lock him out and proceed on with his plan, knowing that the first officer eventually would become incapacitated and die when the plane depressurized.
Love how you, despite this being a Malaysian flight going to China, threw like a Jersey accent on this guy. Like, hey,
go get me a cup of coffee. I'm a little thirsty.
Eastern Italian thing.
I don't know.
It's a default. I know.
It is a default. And the plane doors. I did see a couple of videos talking about those. So yeah, these doors are these huge, unbreakable doors. You cannot break through them, specifically because obviously after 9/11, you don't want people getting into the cockpit that you don't want in there. And like, there's even like I think he even has a CCTV camera of the door on his console, right? And so the first officer can like, just let me in. And there's a switch on the console that you can turn it to open the door, or you can switch it to deny entry. And there was one specific video I saw talk about this where it's like, well, what happens if like the pilot is just incapacitated? They didn't intentionally lock me out, but like they're just, oh my goodness, fell asleep. The co-pilot has a code for the door that he gives. And if there is no response from the cockpit after like 30 seconds, that code will boop open the door. But on that console, there's a switch that says deny. You can flip it to like deny, and you can deny the code to work.
Okay.
So there was literally no way. Once that first officer was locked out, there was no way for him to get back in. He could not get back in. He could not stop the pilot. If this is what the pilot wanted to do, unfortunately, the first officer is kind of shit out of luck.
Can we roll back on that thing where we talked about like phone calls and stuff? Like we're assuming that the going theory, at least from what you've been telling me and what you and Shai seem to believe, that came off as really rude. I mean, like, this is the currently going theory.
This is probably the leading theory as far as what happened to MH370.
Pilot had the co-pilot get out, lock the door on him, and then basically depressurize the cabin or something of that nature, and then they all died by oxygen asphyxiation.
Basically, hypoxia, then passing out. Bleh.
And they were not able to get any phone calls or texts out because of no signal, no whatever.
Because they're slowly succumbing to the loss of oxygen. Also, like Shai said, it is super cold.
Right.
And
okay.
So the first officer.
The main reason I ask is because like the thing is that I'm not saying that a call would save them, because it won't.
Sure. At that point, they're unfortunately kind of doomed.
But there's the cell phone companies. They didn't grab any of the possible text messages or anything attempted to be sent. Nothing. Because you would think, if anything, the co-pilot realizing what's happening would be like, holy shit, you gotta tell someone, I gotta do something with this, right? Unless they didn't have time.
There was just nothing about that. From what I understood, there was just either like no service. They never found any of the data. Obviously, you're not going to find the phones in the wreckage. So I wish I could elaborate more on that, but there just wasn't really anything on that. So also the first officer lasts a little longer because there is like a oxygen tank in the back that you can use. It doesn't have as much as the cockpit, and unfortunately, it doesn't have. What was it? It's like it's not pure enough that it will actually keep you alive in a depressurized cabin. It'll help. It'll give you more time than like a passenger one, but you're still kind of shit out of luck, unfortunately. So he lasted a little longer, and the going theory is as they were sort of making that turn on Penang, the reason that the cell phone tower got that ping is because the first officer was like, oh my god, let me try and do something on my phone, anything on my phone, please pick it up, please someone realize that we're here. He only gets one bar, and it's like, shit, I can't make a call, I can't make a text, god damn it.
That was the thing I was thinking about, was like, he would be the one to attempt to phone someone because he realizes what's happening.
Yeah, he's the only chance at something happening and this flight being salvaged, and yeah, he's unfortunately just...
I mean, I don't know if that's just a stroke of really good luck for the hijacker, bad luck for everyone else, or if he specifically was smart enough to know that was the spot that had no service. It'd be pretty wild if they attempted that, but it could just be a stroke of bad luck.
Could be. I mean, he is a very experienced pilot. He knows this area like the back of his hand. He flies this area so often. Like we said, he has tens of thousands of hours. So, also, it's kind of highly unlikely that this was a hijacking. Since, like we said, the time between when the plane made that sharp turn away from Vietnam from the last radio call signal, it was just too short for it to be a sudden takeover of the plane. Like, there just wasn't enough time to somehow get into the cockpit, storm it, take control, turn it. Like, there just wasn't enough time. Also, like I just said, given the flight path of MH370, whoever was piloting the plane had to have, like, expertise knowledge of the surrounding airspace. Because again, he was kind of flying just outside military airspace. He was still getting picked up by their radar, but he was flying just outside their like range. So he knew where he could fly to go basically undetected. And Shai said, according to... Oh,
Shai just posted it. Yeah, I was like, okay, cell towers cannot reach the height that the plane was currently on, and Wi-Fi most definitely was not on as well, so...
Yeah. Oh, that's true, too. I don't know why I didn't think about, like, yeah, they're too freaking high up for the cell towers to... Yeah, jeez, yeah.
I mean, obviously, like when you try to send a text without Wi-Fi, you know, you get the green bubbles if you're an iPhone person, and then, like, or they just start all arriving really quickly by the time you get back down. But normally, you know, I text with Wi-Fi, but I guess if they just turned the Wi-Fi off, then, yeah, nothing would go through.
Yep. Also, as far as hijacking being ruled out, it got ruled out because there was no contact from any hijacker. There were no threats. There were no demands that were ever made. But also, after the fact, there was no terrorist organization that even thought to take credit for the hijacking. And usually when a hijacking like this happens, it's like somebody is going to try and take credit for it. Someone is going to try and make demands, but nothing. So, naturally,
Mr. Pilot Man, what was his mental condition? Do we have anything on that?
So, like we've been talking about, the prime suspect in this case is obviously Captain Zahari Ahmed Shah. One very important piece of information about Captain Shah is that he was a big time user of flight simulators. Loved flight simulators. One of the more active members of the Malaysian flight sim community. He even had a YouTube channel dedicated to some of his flight sims. The YouTube channel still exists. I think all the flight simulator videos were taken down for, obvious reasons. And before the flight happened, he deleted the SIM from his computer. But investigators were still able to pull some of the data from it, and it showed that he had made a simulated flight that was eerily similar to flight MH370, and one where he planned to take his simulated flight over the Indian Ocean. Like, he literally put his flight sim plane over the Indian Ocean in a very similar manner, set the fuel to empty, and basically wanted to see what would happen to his plane in the sim if it ran out of fuel right over the Indian Ocean.
Really?
Yes.
That's
and
weird.
Then there's sort of the eerie little bit about how, so again, it took that flight plan, swung around the island of Penang. This island of Penang is where Captain Shaw was both born and raised. And so it almost felt like, to a lot of people, he was doing one last flyby of his hometown before taking the plane down.
So this captain is clearly experienced, though. Very experienced.
Very experienced. Super experienced pilot.
So if we're going with this prevailing theory, what snapped?
That is a great question. We will get into it. Like we've been talking about, the biggest question right now is like, what snapped? Why did he not only kill himself, but also all
hundreds
of
on people?
Board? 227 passengers, 12 crew members. As far as anyone knew, he was acting completely normal. He wasn't having any major finance problems. I've seen a few sources say he was having trouble with an affair he was having. Shai posted a picture of him and his family. Maybe there was some marital affairs, but nothing that would indicate this level of just like absolute reckless abandon.
Okay.
Though I do remember having Shai and I had a chat about this, and it's like we were like, it's really hard to judge where a pilot's mental capacity is sometimes, because naturally, you know, before flights, you need to be deemed mentally fit to fly. You know, you don't want to send up a pilot that seems like he's just jittery out of his minds. So I would imagine a lot of pilots are really good at repressing and hiding any sort of mental health issues, because if you're shown to be mentally unfit, you lose your job. You lose the flight. Or if you go and seek mental health aid, at the time anyway, it was like, yeah, good for you, but pilots saw it as almost like, that's a negative on your career. You're going to come under severe scrutiny because people are going to wonder about your mental health and if you are okay to fly. So there's a chance that he was just, he was just mentally just snapped, and he just never showed it because he just repressed it for so long because he didn't want to lose his job.
Okay. Interest. So, okay. So there's a weird aside. A weird aside.
Mm-hmm.
DK, were you there when I was talking about my sister and her big Indian film thing?
Yeah, yes, I was.
Okay.
Yes, I was.
So small context for our viewers. My sister is a huge film buff, and she has recently had her new hyperfixation be Indian movies, not just Bollywood, but all the other woods. DDLJ, Shah Rukh Khan, etc. One of the things she told me about, and it was part of the understanding for the 2023 hit movie Javan, was that a lot of farmers and stuff would end up taking on lots of debt for their farm and killing themselves to absolve their entire family of the debt. This is a real thing that happened actually in India, and it was just simply the basis for part of the film. I remember in the last one we talked about, the last plane story with the 3 Giga Chad FedEx dudes, that whole point of that guy was he was attempting to take himself out and get like settlement money for his family.
Mm-hmm.
Anything like that with this one?
Thing was, he didn't have any financial woes. As far as I'm aware, he didn't have any financial issues. He wasn't in massive debt. Like, again, there was that affair that people thought may have made him snap. But as far as I could find, I don't think he had any financial stress that he was like, oh yeah, I got to make sure my family gets my, my life insurance or something. So as far as I'm aware, that wasn't really a thing either. But yeah, like Shai said, it's a big problem among pilots. If you admit you had a little bit of depression, you are immediately put on unpaid leave for a long time. So pilots, even if they are depressed and exhausted, have to pretend to be fine, because if they don't, they lose their job, which sucks.
I mean, now this might be totally a completely unbiased or a completely unfair comparison, but if I had to assume a profession that would have a large amount of adultery, I would assume pilots, because they are constantly flying to other areas and new hotels and yada yada, and
they're constantly away from their families too.
Constantly from their families.
You unfortunately have the craving of the flesh, and, you're all over the place. Oh, I'm in a completely different country. Surely no one will ever find out, and I bet that does happen.
I imagine it might. I mean, to any of our fans who may be pilots, I apologize for making assumptions of your character. But I don't know, because that could be a
tough job.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's clearly a tough job. Hours are awful, and you don't get to stay anywhere.
Yeah, it is got to be a mentally taxing job.
Yeah. I don't know. That was just a thought of mine. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. There's even a theory, of course, that this whole thing was politically motivated, right? Since at the time, the Malaysian government really corrupt. And Shah was very, very outspoken about how corrupt the Malaysian government was. And some believe that the Malaysian government had taken a political prisoner that Shah either knew, was close to, or respected, and they were detaining them on some really bogus charges. And the theory goes that Shah decided to take the plane and all of the passengers hostage, and then he would use them as leverage to force Malaysia's hand and release the political prisoner. And that at some point, while they were flying over like the Malaccan Strait, or while they were over the Indian Ocean, he actually made contact with the Malaysian government and was like, hey, I've got all these hostages, and they're at my whim, and if you don't release that prisoner, we're going down. I'm going to take all these passengers, we're going down. You better release the hostages.
This seems unlikely.
Yeah. And when Malaysia refuses, he's just like, well, fine. You want to tell me to F myself? I'm taking the plane down. And then, of course, Malaysia is not going to talk about that. They're going to get rid of any communications of the cover-up and just, typical government conspiracy theory and blame it on, what they blamed it on.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like if you're going to take hostages for some kind of like thing in that nature, you tend not to be super keen on killing them so quickly.
True.
Normally it's a lot of peacocking. Instead.
Yeah, it does seem like a little far-fetched. Like, I feel like at that point it's like, okay, the government won't listen to me. Maybe there's some way I can get my message out to the public. Call a journalist or something. Get the plane down to a level where you can actually use your phone, use the radio better. Call a journalist, call someone that can get this message out to the general public that I have all these hostages and the Malaysian government isn't doing anything about it, So I don't know. That it does seem like a little bit of a stretch to me.
You would also, in a sense, not want to be. You would want to be as loud as possible. You would not want to be as quiet and cut things off. You would want to be very, very loud and in charge.
Yeah, so the government did also lie about where the plane was for several days, delaying the search and costing other countries millions, wasting time searching in other places. So yeah, they don't seem nice. Was it them lying about it specifically, or was that just more of the incompetence of, well, they did have that satellite data for a while. They did have that satellite data from Inmarsat for 3-4 days, and they were claiming they were verifying it. but who knows if they were just like,
There's that old phrase, never attribute malice to what can be rationalized by ignorance. Which is a really good one. It's like
that's a great one. I need to remember that. I think you've told me that before. I need to.
Yeah, it's like 95% of the time people are stupid before they're evil. And based on what I'm hearing here, I think I might go with the stupid angle.
It could be. But the sad reality is we'll probably never really know what motivated Shaw to do what he did. Granted, there have actually been a bunch of pieces of MH370 that have washed up on the shores of southern Africa, on Madagascar, but they're like these really small pieces. Like there's the Flapperon, which is such a silly name for something that just flaps on the wing. But anyway, and that probably broke away while the plane was going down at supersonic speed. That's washed up on the shores. But I think they also found the shell of one of the entertainment systems from one of the seats. They have found pieces of the engine. They found like the Rolls-Royce logo because the engines on the plane, I believe, were Rolls-Royce brand.
What the shit?
So they found like those little, they found stuff from inside the plane. They found stuff from outside the plane. So there's not really any debate that the plane just went down and just on impact. Because for a little while, there were some people that thought that maybe, it was actually a hijacking and the plane had been landed somewhere and, maybe their loved ones were still alive and they just needed to be brought home. Which I can't say I blame the families for thinking that because obviously you always want to hold out hope that, maybe they're alive somewhere. There's no confirmation. They haven't found any bodies. And so once all of the pieces were found, everybody was just kind of like, yeah, that's kind of the finality of it. They're gone. So, and I think there were talks that even in 2024, they were going to start searching again. But with how vast the Indian Ocean is, like, you are just never going to find anything. It's all you can do again is just kind of hope that something washes up on the shores. And even if you find the black box, there might not even be any recordings on the black box because there are some theories that say that, once he hit the Indian Ocean, Captain Shaw took off his mask and let the hypoxia take him because the whole plan was he was going to, the alleged plan that everybody thinks, the leading theory is he's going to go down with the plane anyway. So he takes off the mask and he just lets the autopilot do what it's got to do. And it could have been that this MH370 in its final hours was quite literally just a ghost ship that was flying with dead bodies and then crashed into the ocean.
So we're pretty keen on the pilot being the problem instead of just massive technical failure and the plane crashing into the ocean.
There's just to me, there's just no other explanation.
Because the way it turned, the way it moved, it could have landed, I'm assuming, very often during its path.
Oh, sure. Yep. And yeah, was it this? Well, that's true. Because like the way it flew into the Indian Ocean, it was like it did look like it was making some subtle movements and adjustments, and maybe it was glided upwards to make the impact even greater. So it's just. What most sources say is just like, look, it's Occam's razor. Like the most obvious choice is probably what happened. Like it's so hard to point to any other explanation for just how deliberate this was, how it happened, what the timeline was. It's hard to come up with anything else. So, MH370!
Well, eventually someone will find the tattered bits of the plane 40 years from now, and I'll be late 60s and fascinated. Like, I remember when that went missing, and my grandkids will be
might
shocked.
not even.
They probably won't. You're right.
Like by then, if it's at the bottom of the ocean, it's probably just going to get compressed into dust in like 40 years, right?
I mean, here's the thing, right? If it's the last 50 years, we have had such a monumental increase in technology.
That's fair.
The 70s, You know, like the internet, phones. Well, cell phones. I mean, all that kind of stuff. The next 2070, we're gonna scan the whole bottom of the ocean. Let me tell you what, we're all gonna know.
Although, doesn't it kind of seem like technology has stagnated a little bit? Like when you look at like the massive strides we've made in like, from like say the 90s to now. Like, doesn't it seem like technology has kind of hit like a stagnant point?
No.
Right now? No?
We did not have the internet in the 90s, my guy.
I know.
Well,
right? But
well
like,
no, we
like,
kind of did a little bit.
Since say like, I don't know. But doesn't it kind of seem like we've hit a point where technology's kind of hit like, a level field and it's not really going up at the crazy rate it was from like the 90s to now?
I think it's more that like the invention of the internet was so monumental. We have not created Internet 2 yet,
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, dude, I was shopping. I was online and I was looking for some stuff. I found a 4 terabyte thumb drive. Like a USB thumb drive, the size of my thumb, actually, maybe
4
smaller than that,
terabytes?
for 4 fucking terabytes. Like every like 5 years, they double the storage space, or like it. I don't know. Maybe at some point, right? And the number one. What are the 2 fastest revolutions in technology? War and porn. You joke, but it's true.
I hate that you're right.
You joke, but it's true. War and porn.
I hate that you're right. Like this.
Like if we're gonna have robots out there, they're either gonna be made to kill people or to be like
or to have sex with.
That's
true. Isn't that why the internet was created?
There's a lot of reasons,
but to like talk back and forth between military bases and do it faster.
There's a whole shebang, right? But like, I feel like at some point, radar and that kind of stuff will eventually get good enough to see the ocean in a way. I bet. Whether it's just a giant mossy pile of rubble, we'll see. I mean, who knows what it'll be in 30 years? Who knows?
True. Also, Shai says, by the way, this is driving me wild. This is a guess where the plane is, and it's like, wow, good luck finding that tiny thing in the enormity of the ocean. Yeah, it's
that little red blip.
Yeah, it's so impossible to, and that's where they think the plane went down like that night. And it's been, we're coming up on 11-ish years. I think this year was like the 11-year, I don't want to say anniversary, but 11 years since it happened. And so that was where it crashed. It's been 11 years of it floating and wandering away from that point too. So good luck. Because like I said, tons of stuff is washed up in Madagascar, I think Tanzania, Southern Africa. So yeah, it's you're almost probably never going to find that, unfortunately, which sucks for the families because they're still just like racked with it, and they're trying to come up with just any way to at least give themselves some closure on the situation. And that's brutal, man. That's brutal. But MH370, there you go.
There it is.
There, and that's the condensed version.
Sure, that's the quick version.
That's the TLDR version. There's so much more we could talk about, but we've already been here for an hour and a half, so
that's true. That's true. All right. Well, that was okay. So you said you had 2 final things going on for Detective Ridiculous, and that was one of them.
That was one of them. That was a big one.
And so you said you had the last 2 were also both going to be pretty big.
Uh-huh. And so this minor spoiler, I'm not going to tell him what it is, Shai, but you have heard of it, Bricky.
Well, that's not a spoiler.
Nope, but you have heard of it.
All right. Well, I heard of this.
Yeah. And now you know a lot more about this.
Well, everyone, remember the most important thing. Keep your mental health in check. Take care of yourself. Be happy. Find love in the world, or else you might be lost at the bottom of the Indian Ocean.
Never leave your room. Never leave your house.